bit of a
So,
weird setup today.
yes. So Ben and I haven't met in real world. We met only online, but Ben is an inspiring and talented sound designer and foley artist. He focused mostly on recording sounds and going out to what we're calling field recording. Field recording is super, super interesting. There are a lot of things that can go wrong. I know that I definitely am not doing it right, so I'm here to hear from you and learn from you. Ben, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. And actually, I'm doing things wrong all the time. It's like part of the trade. So that's fine. If you're doing something wrong, you're on the right path.
Great. Can you start by telling us a little bit of how you got to that point in life?
Yeah, sure. So, as many sound designers, I've come to learn, they like most of them come from music background or trying to do something with music. And for me, it was pretty much the same. I always loved music and I was trying to learn more about making music myself or mixing music. And so I did like a 12-month course to learn. It was called, I think, Audio Engineer Pro or something, to learn to mix and master stuff and how to record stuff and like basically, yeah, all the basics of an audio engineer. And during that time,
Did
I
you
learned
play
that
an
I
instrument
really
before
like.
that?
No instrument at all. So like I'm very untalented
Wow.
with instruments. So I can't read notes, nothing like that. I just wanted to do like more electronic stuff and trying to figure out if I can spark the interest in learning the theory that way. But yeah, during that I learned that I really like manipulating sounds, mixing stuff, making a simple recording into something extraordinary and yeah, weird. And so I went into the whole rabbit hole of sound design. And this was, I think, yeah, almost 10 years ago now. And yeah, started to try to find whatever I could get on information. And it was very scarce. So yeah, lots of experimenting, trying to connect with other people, finding out how to do stuff just by trying and just loving the process. And that's, yeah, what got me into it, essentially, the love for sound.
That's amazing. Like, yeah, you usually hear people that come from it. Like for me, it was from music, but for you, you
Mm-hmm.
kind of like just skipped that and went right into the deep water.
Exactly, yeah.
So now also I want to ask, especially for true beginners, can you just describe to us how your day looks like? What do you do? Like,
Yeah. So usually my daughter wakes me up because I get up late and she doesn't. No, but in all seriousness, it really depends. I have like I would say a wide portfolio of things I do. Sometimes I do sound design for like a short film. Sometimes I do it for a video game. Sometimes I do the implementation work of it. Or sometimes and oftentimes, as often as I can, I go out and record stuff. So there really isn't like a typical day. But I would say overall, the work is as much time as I can spending outside and listening, because listening is the first step, and we will go into that later. But for recording, like really learn to listen is the most important thing. And yeah, spending time finding something interesting to record, oftentimes with a purpose, sometimes just out of curiosity for a place. And of course, the other, I would say like half or something is then yeah, getting the material in the studio cleaned up, finding interesting things and making sounds or a project out of it.
so, yeah, let's go into this. How do you pick interesting sounds? What is an interesting sound?
Everything is interesting. Like that's the fun thing about sound
Well,
design.
if
That
everything is
everything is
interesting,
interesting.
then
Yeah,
okay. If
yeah.
everything is
Because
interesting,
like
then nothing is interesting.
I mean, you could see it from a glass half full or
Like,
glass
how do you
half
choose?
empty.
How do
You
you
know,
choose? Yeah.
I think it just tickles something. You know, I'm on my way to somewhere and I hear like this metal door creak, and it sounds like a metal door I've never heard before, and suddenly that's interesting. Or sometimes it's something like I hear something very ordinary, but I know like this is exactly what I need for some kind of project. So I'm always having my ears open for stuff, and sometimes it's things you have heard like 100 times, but now you have the context of doing something with it, and then you're like, oh, I can use this for this, or I can, like, I don't know, I can add something to this, or this door or this, I don't know, elevator or this subway tunnel sounds exactly like something in the game I'm doing right now, and that would fit the mood perfectly. So really, for me, like almost all sound is interesting. The only thing I really don't like is planes, planes and traffic, because they ruin so many recordings. But also them, of course, you need those from time to time. So yeah, for me, it's mostly about emotional connection, about a feeling. If I hear something and it tickles something in me, either it's something I haven't heard before, or it's something that just feels satisfying. Like some sounds just are satisfying, like the foaming of milk for your cappuccino, for example. It's something that you emotionally connect to, some warm feeling of morning routine or something like that. For other people, that might be like annoying because they work in a cafeteria all day and they hear that all day long. So that sound for them might be like super annoying, and the emotional connection might be work. So yeah, it's really subjective, I think.
I feel, yes, people in the comments are saying they feel that perspective, and me too. I remember there was a quote from Rick Rubin, I want to say, that he said, "It's almost like food. Like, how do you know if you like food? It's just you kind of know.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you know this? I don't know why. It's like you just
Yeah,
know. It's a feeling inside
yeah,
of you." So I'm gonna ask a different question. How do you approach a project? Like they give you a movie or a video game and you have to add sounds to it. You don't even know where to
yeah.
start. What do you do?
Panic first. The first step is panic. It's like, oh my God, I'm an imposter, because imposter syndrome is real and it doesn't go away. But it's fun, like you learn to live with it.
Thanks for saying that.
And I would say the first steps are, even before like listening or trying to record something, is to go deep into the project with the people that make it. Like ask them why they want to make it, for example, or why something is there. Like an enemy, for example, in a game, it's not just this, like, I don't know, scary creature. Maybe it has an history, or maybe it has something where it's like, this is here at this moment in time to teach the player that it's a scary game. Then you'll have to think of it as a scary thing. Or I don't know, like, I'm just rambling a bit, but essentially trying to find out as much as you can from the game, and what the developers, or for a movie or for a short film, doesn't matter, what they want the audience to feel and experience. Because from that, I can connect to my own emotions and can say, oh, that makes me feel like this, that makes me feel like this. And of course, as I said, it's subjective, so you have to test those theories out then. But if you have like a strong feeling about what kind of emotions you want to have in different, I don't know, in different biomes or levels, or for different creatures or characters, that's a great way to start. And then what I really like to do is, like the next step after that is finding like a sonic language. So one really easy example that I always like to bring up, because it's so straightforward, is Call of Saragna. Is like a pixel art game that I do, 90s style pixel art. So I set myself like the sonic language of having it sound like the old school 90s games. So a bit crunchy, a bit lo-fi. And so everything has to fit in that kind of, in that kind of frame of reference. And yeah, if you find then your language, then you have these constrictions. And with rules, it's always good, because you get more creative if you have like a set of rules to follow.
That is very true. I love this approach. So when I use this approach of like an audio language, sometimes for me it will be like an instrument that I created with a synthesizer, and I'll use like 5 or 6 different instruments in one app, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
How does it work with sounds that you recorded? Like, what is the language of captured sound?
Yeah, that could be different kind of things. To connect to the example earlier, like the Call of Saragna, I used a very special microphone. I have it here. It's called a copper phone, which is like an old school. We will do like a sound demo later if you want to, but it's
I
like an
was
old
about
school,
to say, I
crunchy kind of
hope that you
sound.
got a demo for us. Yes.
Yeah, that's why my setup is weird. I hope it all works out, but we will
Very
see.
good.
But that's like the kind of things, like especially with games, when you have many people working on it, it oftentimes, what I really like is that I am maybe just for the recording, and I record this material, and then I essentially provide a sample library to the people designing the sounds, and they can all go back to these kinds of samples, and they all will sound kind of similar, because, for example, we used the same microphones, or we used similar techniques, or we recorded it all with some purpose in mind. And yeah, that kind of like building up an arsenal, or a sample library for the project, then that's something that's really exciting to me. I also, of course, have to use stock sounds sometimes. For example, I can't blow up stuff every time because it's very expensive and my wife won't let me. But yeah, as much as I can, I want to try to record myself for this specific project. And most of the material I will never reuse again because it's made in the moment with this emotional intention. And I built this library and I use it. And when the project is finished, I might keep one or two like very special sounds for some occasions, but usually it's like this language is for this project and now it's done. And I start
Well,
with a
that's
fresh canvas again.
interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, you start with a fresh canvas every time.
Yeah, almost. Like really, it depends, of course, and also depends on the size and budget. Of course, I can't like do weeks of recording for thousands of sounds. If it's a really small indie game, then I might resort to library sounds. But of course, that's always communicated. But yeah, my approach is I want to record as much original material in the moment as possible because my headspace is going to be different the next project. My equipment might be different. My places I visit might be different. And that is something that really excites me and that also then reinforces my own creativity to make something out of it.
That is so, so true. I love that. So for true beginners, where do you even start? What would you say?
Yeah. Learn to listen. Like the first thing you do is you might not even like buy a recorder or something. Just go out and learn to really, really listen because that is a skill. Like in the beginning, I thought, oh, yeah, I know how to listen. I can sit still for 5 minutes in the forest and listen to birds. But that's not really the thing. It's like really try to understand how some sounds work. And I have a really good example that I just recently talked with another field recordist about. Like if you listen to a stream or like a waterfall, um, most of the time people will say, yeah, it's like the sound of a waterfall, but it's not the sound of a waterfall. It's many small sounds, air pockets, water rushes that all form the stream together. And that means if you have like a little brook, you can go there and you can put your ear very close to the water. You can put it in different spots and you can hear very, very different sounds. And all these sounds make up this brook. But that means also, depending on where you stand, the height of your ears or your microphone, where you point them, it all sounds very different. You can get thousands of sounds of just a little brook because it's made of many, many, many sounds. And understanding that is very key because then you start to see those patterns and other things as well, where it's like, oh yeah, there's a car sound. But no, it's not just a car sound. It's like the tires are rubbing against asphalt or something else, maybe dirt. Then there's some swinging of the chassis, maybe if it's an old one. Maybe you have like the cars of a youth guy that has like this big subwoofer in the back and something rattles and you hear the music and you hear the windows. And then you have maybe some kind of reverb from the place it's in. And all these components make it up. And these kinds of trying to analyze stuff and trying to really see how many different sound bites are in a single sound, that opens you up to really explore different things and also try to figure out how things work because you want to, of course, recreate those in a game, right? And you can't put a million sounds in there, but you might be more alert to the things where it's like, oh, if the player walks around here, I might have a different reverb because I know that it changes in real life if I see it or hear it from the other side and stuff like that. So this kind of experience of knowing how a sound really is made is something that helps immensely. And you can hear that in, I don't know, in games that have like a very simple soundscape. If you're, for example, someone that's always out in nature, you can easily spot very quickly that it's just like the same bird sounds over and over, or it's like there's no different reverb because it's all forest. Why would we need different reverbs?
Our brain tunes into it in 2 seconds. Like we just know immediately.
Yeah.
When it's not that, when it's not real, it's like the uncanny valley of sound. It's like immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then depending on how much experience yourself have and being in that place, then your ears and your brain is more attuned and you see and hear more and more of those like errors and those little things. And then, the suspension of disbelief doesn't work. And that makes the whole experience less immersive.
That is so true. And our becoming a better sound designer, the first challenge is to listen to sound. And the second challenge is to understand the difference between the sound and what caused the sound. So like a
Yes.
sound could be a car passing by. The cause of sound is the tires are touching like little rocks that are underneath it, and the rocks are moving out, and every time it drops, that's what you're actually hearing. So
Yes.
when you start defining those things, then you start, as you said, start understanding air pockets and where does sound travel and how does it, what do you actually hear, which is not the bigger picture, but every little detail that makes that picture.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can then
Um,
really hone in those details and say like, oh, I want to make this specific tiny sound stand out because that makes me feel something, for example, or it's cool. Like, I mean, it's so cool having something in a game where players are like, oh, that is so amazing. If you go to that place at night with this weather, then you hear these different animal sounds. And as a sound designer, you then are like, yes, he found it. It's like, oh, I made this specifically for like making the world more immersive, and some people hear it. So yeah, I like those kind of
that is a
details.
good technique. I would ask, like, where does this go along with sound designers that talk about how, like, you just morph few different sounds that are unrelated to one another and just smash them together to create a new sound? Like, you have monsters that are created from like 10 different animals recording together and then just
Yeah.
smushed into one recording. So, recreating reality, but also morphing into something else that doesn't even exist in reality.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it depends on, again, it depends on what kind of emotion you want to evoke. And oftentimes, especially like with games or with movies, you will have something larger than life, something like a creature, and you will want to stand out and will want to have it sound more unnatural or something. But you will always have some kind of, as you said, like you mostly will merge some kind of natural elements in there to make them a bit more grounded and make your brain, like at some subconscious level, think that it's a real creature, because you can hear some kind of texture of a lion or something, and your animal brain knows like this lion sound at some point, at some level. So if some of those textures come out, then it's something that's really amazing. And then you can, like you said, if you then smush it with different other sounds or things that are like, I don't know, that like creaking of metal, for example, something for me oftentimes can sound really, really dangerous. And I like to use it in some kind of things, especially if I want to make the player feel uneasy, because I don't know, maybe it doesn't work for every player, but for me it works because when I walk somewhere and I hear it, I hear these specific creaks. It's not the same, of course, but like these specific creaks that feel like the structure is about to break, it makes me very anxious. And these kinds of like, I don't know, these kinds of triggers you can use in different aspects as well. You can use these creaks then also for creatures. And like if someone has the same trigger as you, that can really hit the spot. And I mean, I don't know, great sound design just probably hits a lot of triggers. So most of the people will have those kinds of experiences. And yeah, finding those things again is something that goes back to listening and to really hearing like, oh, why does it make me feel that? What kind of sound makes me feel like that, and why? And yeah, then you can use that also to make some unnatural things and build an emotional connection with that.
So it sounds like it's not just tuning yourself to the sounds of the world, but also tuning yourself to understand what things make you feel a certain way.
Exactly.
Can
Like
you
for
talk
me,
about
it
that a
definitely
little
is.
bit
Yeah.
more? Yeah. Can you give
Of
us
course.
more
I mean,
examples?
yeah. One thing that I did on Airwiggles, probably people are aware of the social network for audio people, but one thing I did was trying to
I've
find out why I react very strongly to styrofoam. Like when I touch styrofoam, the kind of squeaking noise it makes, it feels like someone is like, I don't know, scratching my brain from the inside. It feels horrible, like absolutely horrible. And at one point I was like, okay, is it the sound or is it the touching? So I recorded myself making myself like very, very unhappy. Like my face was distorted while I'm touching styrofoam, and I recorded it and I EQ'd stuff to find out which kinds of frequencies will react, yeah, will trigger a reaction in my brain. And I found out like actually the kind of frequency range that does it. Like and for like almost scientific purposes, I then posted it and asked people to rate it. And some people were like, I can listen to this and it doesn't do nothing for me. And some people were like, just a little bit at these frequencies, but this frequency is like horrible. So these kinds of things, I don't know. It's just a weird experimental thing you can go into. And that's one thing. Like the styrofoam thing is something I've had on my mind for forever, and now made this like test thing for a year ago or something, which I found really interesting. And yeah, I think that is a good example.
Just curious, did you test
yeah,
it with people and you asked them like how they listen to it? Like, was it through headphones, through their phone, through other means?
yeah, I was
Because the
guessing they would
frequency
all. I mean,
response
it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't very scientific. It was just like putting it out there. But they were all sound designers, so I would expect them to have some kind of decent setup, at least, and headphones. But as I said, like not scientific at all. But it was interesting to see like having 10 or 15 people listen to it, and some don't react at all, others react. That also means it's not just my experience, because I had this experience touching it. So when I heard the sound, I knew it had made me feel bad. So it also other people also reacted. So that meant the sound is actually the reaction, not the touching itself. And that was something that I wanted to find out. Is it just me touching stuff, or can I listen to a recording and it makes me uneasy? And yeah, like squeaking sounds, apparently some people have it with felt pens. Of course, the classic is like chalk on a sideboard or something. Yeah, some people have that. I don't have that, for example. But yeah, these kinds of things. The other end, at least for me, is I love rushing water or streaming water, like waterfalls or little brooks, little, I don't know, droplets of water, bubbling noises. Everything that's water related makes me just very happy. And I can spend hours recording like a single, I don't know, a small piece of a brook, and just different angles, and yeah, putting my microphone into the water, stuff like that. We can go into that then. But these kinds of things always make me happy. And I always had make me feel, I don't know, somber and calm in a video game when I'm out there in nature and you hear this water. And I'm guessing it's some subconscious thing, because hey, water, that means you can stay alive here. But yeah.
Well, you're kind of transitioning us to the next saga, which is microphones. Let's talk for a second about microphones. Firstly, I want to ask again, just for true beginners, what would be the go-to microphone that they should get?
That's always the question, right? Gear. What kind of gear? To be honest,
Everyone
whatever
loves
you can
buying gear.
afford.
It's fun.
Yeah. I could say whatever you can afford is totally fine at the time. I started with a Zoom H4, I think, which was already pretty good. But a Zoom H2 is also great. I've heard great recordings from field recorders, and it's really not about the gear. It's really trying to learn how to use it and to see what limitations it has. And I've heard like very, very horrible recordings from my expensive recorder, and very great recordings from a Zoom H2, which is essentially like the most basic field recorder you can get. So really like try to find out what kind of speaks to you, or maybe test them if you have a shop nearby. That's always fun. But get like a small portable field recorder, not like big gear. Don't spend thousands of euros or dollars. Just get like a small one, like a Zoom, or there are other ones as well, like they're Sony, and they're all pretty good. Normally, you can't really go wrong with like most of them. I've tried a lot of them, and all of them are decent. And then just go out and test and record a lot. And the thing is, why I say just get a cheap one, a portable one, because if you can have it in your pocket at all times, then you're going to be recording way more, because you're always going to have it handy. So you're absolutely are able to learn very quickly. If you have all that gear like I have with my backpack that's like very heavy, I'm not going to take that everywhere. You know, it's like I'm also like now building up a simple rig that I can take everywhere. And so these kinds of things, just get a very simple, like for example, I'm a Zoom guy, so I like Zoom. So a Zoom H2 or a Zoom H4 is pretty great for the beginner. It's absolutely the suitable thing, and you can finish projects with that. It's fine.
What's the important things to know about microphones when you're buying them?
That you can get addicted. It's
Love
the
that.
fun thing is, yeah, for me, it's really like it's such a passion. The first time I heard like I would say like a special microphone, contact microphone, for example, I was just blown away, because it felt a bit like superpowers, right? You know, it's like you have another way of hearing things that no human can hear. Just this microphone can pick this up. And then it's like you experiment with that and you hear sounds that you couldn't hear before, or things sound very different, or you can hear sounds. For example, this one is like a contact microphone that is coated so you can put it into water. Let me just put it up to the camera because it's really small. It's just a black blob, as you can see. So it's like a very simple contact microphone, and it has this big coating. So it means you can not only put it like just into the water, into the bathtub. If you hear bubbles from inside the water with this microphone, it just sounds like you are underwater hearing it. And normally you can't record that with microphone. So if you have that, and it's like a whole world opens up in terms of water recordings. And then those are like, nowadays, those are either very, very sturdy or very cheap. So in both cases, you can freeze them, just put them in a block of ice and listen to how it sounds if water gets frozen and if it thaws from the inside. I've put this into actually in the kitchen and just boiling water. And yeah, listen to how boiling water sounds from the inside, like if your hand would have been in that water. And those kinds of things are just amazing. So I would say go into
Have you tried putting
maybe
it in
DIY.
soda?
Yeah, soda as well, of course, soda, and also like a soda
So
stream where
much
you can
fun.
put more carbonated water in. That's also always fun. And these kinds of experiences, they lend to experimentation, and then you want to find out what else is there, and then you get stuff like this one, which is an electromagnetic
Oh
microphone.
my God! Yes.
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 It's so cool.
Yes.
It's so cool. This one, for example, is from Lom Audio. I can really recommend the brand anyway. But what I really like is these kind of microphones, like all the schematics are open source, so you can build it yourself. You don't have to buy it. And that's really, really cool. Like if you're into building your stuff and electronics, you can go into a rabbit hole and like build a great contract microphone for a couple of bucks or something like that.
Let's stay on that for a second, because most people have never seen a microphone that looks like that.
Yes.
And I'm not sure that people are familiar with how it works. Yes. Can you talk about this a little bit more, and maybe play it to us how it would sound like recording with a microphone?
Yes, I can.
Is it connected?
Yeah. Let's just do some hands-on examples. I'm starting with the one I have plugged in, just because I have, and I can build a suspension.
Ben, you're gonna get an award
can hear me now.
for being like our best speaker. Yes.
Oh yeah.
For giving
I'll
us
go
a
over
live
the details.
demonstration.
I will. So this, as you can hear, is like a normal Shure SM7B. So most podcasters or something use them. And if I don't speak into that, but instead speak into this, you might hear that it sounds completely different. I hope you could hear that.
It sounds like Fallout. Yes, we could hear this.
Exactly. It sounds just like the old times. Yeah, and that is so
really,
wonderful.
really low in volume. If you can increase the gain on that.
Oh yeah. Let me try that again. Just a second. So maybe now. Yes. It should be a bit better now. Or maybe even too much. Yeah. Yeah, as you can hear, it's very, very old-timey. So that is that. That is something that I really love. It's a company in America, like a single guy that does this, and he builds it essentially just like the old microphones. And people have asked me, why should I buy something like that? You can just use an effect. But the thing is, an effect destroys the recording, makes it sound like shittier, which is fine for some cases. But this microphone captures pristine audio, but it sounds like colored like the old times. And it's really hard to explain. Like if you have of course, this is now Discord, it's all mono and stuff like that. But if you hear it like with very great headphones and work with the material, it's just, I don't know, it just feels amazing. It's just like it has sounded in the 50s for people working there probably. And I found it amazing to work with. A couple of singers are using them as like a second microphone to change their voice during the tune and stuff like that, which is awesome. And so let's go over to the electronic microphone, and I'll just hope I don't blow your eardrums. So if you have headphones on, maybe, be careful.
Please don't blow my ears. Let's see.
I will try. Okay, so you might hear some faint humming. I'm gonna start slow so you don't get. Can you hear
Can
that?
you explain what we're hearing right now? Yes.
Yes, I just wanted to know it works. So essentially, this is like a copper strand wound around this thing, and it picks up the electricity or like the waves of electricity and converts it to sound. And so that means like if you have a 50 hertz power adapter and you put it over there, you get a 50 hertz wave. So you can make bass sounds. And if I put it, for example, over my computer, you get very nasty kind of sounds. You can also put it over your microphone while you're talking. Or on the camera. What do we have here? What sounds good?
I don't know, the lights in the back. Yeah, that one. Oh. Well, that's actually hearing the frequency of the electricity inside the device.
Exactly. It picks up the frequencies, and of course, those are not like clean sine waves. So you don't get like a 50 hertz just sine wave. That would be not interesting. So like walking around with that and trying to find different sounds is amazing. And of course, if you're designing some kind of electricity weapon or something, then you can, the good thing is you can perform with this. So that means like trying to find a sound from a library that does exactly what you want for some short film, for example, it's tedious. So you can cut up stuff, or you can use this and like perform the action while you're doing it. And sometimes, yeah, you find out that your phone rings during the recording. It doesn't ruin it, of course, but then it picks up this kind of electronic, and yeah, it's so fun to play around with that. And especially even outside, because it has a rather large range. And if you're, for example, next to a power supply company that has these big masts out there, you can really hear it. Electric cars, of course, are amazing. You can walk around there and you have so many different areas that all sound different. So yeah, that's the LOM Audio Preser. Can really recommend that, either buying or building yourself. It's fun.
I did a performance with one of those, but I quantized the notes and I added a delay to it. And then like you could hear like whoa,
That's amazing.
whoa, like
Yeah.
coming from everywhere. And I just set up an entire studio with like just files moving around so I can get the electricity like signal. Yes.
That is wonderful. Yeah, that's great.
I'll
So
post
like,
it later in our group.
that's what I wanted to ask, because I wanted to hear that. That's good if that's a recording. Yeah. I also thought
It
about
is.
like doing some kind of module for synthesizer that has this as an input. So you can play on the synthesizer and have essentially a feedback loop of what it's doing electronically. I'm experimenting with that at some point when I have time. So never, but maybe I will.
I would say the only problem with this is that you have to work with headphones constantly, and it's really hard to hear
Agreed.
it from the actual speakers because the speakers would also emit electricity that will also feed in, so you don't get a clean signal. That's the only caveat about those types of microphones.
Absolutely. So it's let's do the last one. This is, as I said, a contact microphone, so you can tap on it. You couldn't put it anywhere, but also because it's coated, you can put it into water. And if you blow bubbles, it just sounds so nice. Great. Yeah, that's one of my favorite things, putting microphones in water. It's always fun.
I actually have a hydro microphone, but I haven't even tested it. So now you gave me a reason to go around and play with this.
Yeah. If it either wasn't too expensive or it has like a good enough coating, really like the freezing and thawing it out was so cool, because you have like almost laser kind of sounds when the ice breaks. It's so weird. And the bigger surface you can get, the bigger it gets. Of course, putting it into a frozen lake is the best, but then you have to like really thaw it out at some point. Hope it doesn't get damaged.
You recorded in the frozen lake?
Yeah, I've tried that, but I was too afraid to like keep it really in there frozen, so I just played around with the ice. But they were like big cubes of ice underwater, and those like hitting each other, that was pretty cool as well.
Wow.
Yeah, and as always, like, just experiment with stuff. Just try to find out what works. And if you can set aside some time to just, without any purpose, just, experiment. You will always find something interesting and fun, or learn something, or break something.
So, how do you later connect those sounds to a video game? Like you recorded something, or right now you demonstrated a lot of sounds for us. What are you going to do with them once you're done recording?
Yeah, it
What's
depends.
the
I mean, if
process?
I'm the sole sound designer, of course, I'm doing everything, also the implementation. Otherwise, I might just supply all those sounds and say like, hey, here's the stuff. Do you need anything more? Do we want to do anything else? But otherwise, I would, for example, I don't know, I have a game where I need the character underwater to make bubbles when he's about to drown. So I would make something like this. Maybe if I already have the animation, I can perform it to the actual timing and stuff like that. And then I'll just, I just clean them up if necessary. Most of the time, you need some kind of cleanup, and listen through a lot of
When you say
material.
clean up,
And
what do you mean by that?
for example, if I have this microphone and I tap the glass from time to time, you have some sounds in there you don't want to. You either cut out the parts you don't want to, or you use something like RX or something to clean up unwanted frequencies. If you have a hum in there, for example, sometimes you can salvage that. Like the most easy example is if you have a voice recording and like some kind of traffic noise outside that's very low rumble, and you have a kind of high voice, then you can just low cut that all off and the recording is still fine. But it depends. Like if you have a very complex recording with lots of frequencies, you might have to redo stuff, or you might have to try to clean it up. But it could also happen that you find out like at some point when you're cleaning up, you're taking stuff out of the sound, right? So at some point you're breaking it and it just doesn't sound great anymore. So for me, I'd like to use as less cleanup as I can. So most of my cleanup work seriously is just picking out the best bits from maybe, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes of recording of those kind of bubble sounds. And after that, I have like 5 or 10, 2 to 3 second sounds that I love. And that's the one I keep. Everything else I just throw away maybe. So some kind of curating of that. And then, of course, for linear media, it's pretty easy. I put it in the timeline. I, of course, apply reverb or stuff like that, or add it with something else. And for video games, oftentimes you need a lot of variations, or you need a lot of layers. What is cool nowadays that you can really, with stuff like Fmod or Wise, you can just use the layers you have in your DAW and don't create finished sounds out of that, but just create variations for each layer and then put it in the engine and say like, hey, choose one of each, one of this layer, one of this layer, one of this layer. So you can like do the sound effects live during the game. That means you have a lot of more variations. You don't need to render out every different combination of every layer. You just render out 5 of these, 5 of these, 5 of these. And you can maybe reuse some of those layers in other sounds, which is also very cool if you have some kind of signature sounds in your game and you can reuse them and mix them in with something else without having to have another sound file, more space. That is something that's always cool. Like having this kind of, I don't know, very simple thing is like leather movement sounds from a character. You can reuse them for cutscenes, use the same sounds, and the player will instantly hear, oh, that's my character moving there, because he's used to hearing those sounds when he moves around anyway, and you don't need to spend, have more space for it.
Can you talk a
So
bit more about layering? Can you talk a bit more about that technique of
yes.
layering? Because that is not obvious to many people that you should be layering your sound. What does that mean
Oh,
and
yes.
how do you approach it?
Yeah, so layering, essentially what you want is, oftentimes you don't want this one single sound, right? You don't want, I don't know, a clean recording of a gun is not going to end up in a video game. And you're right, it's not obvious to everyone, and I keep forgetting that because I talk to so many sound people. But it's you most of the time, if you create something, let's say something complex like a monster sound, you maybe want the deep roar of a lion, and you want maybe high pitched sounds of a hyena, and maybe you want like in the middle bit, maybe even you do your sounds yourself. You do like a monster impression and pitch them up or down or something. And you mix all those together because you want these low kind of rumbly elements and this powerful thing of the lion. You want these high screeches from the hyena that makes you uneasy because hyenas at night are pretty scary. And you want to have your own recording in the middle that adds something unique or that does something that fits the character. So you put all those together to create the sound, and there's different techniques for like getting them all together. Oftentimes you can just layering up and play them all together. Most of the times you will at least do some kind of EQing and choose the kind of frequencies you want from each sound, and then put them all together and say, okay, I want these low frequencies here, I want these high frequencies. But there are different techniques as well. Like there are plugins that can like merge sounds together and create essentially Morph VST is something like that. You have two sounds and you can fade between those and it just meshes those. One example that did it very greatly, that the first time I saw it in use, was the soundtrack of the new Doom game, the first of the new Doom games, where they mixed the sound of the guitars with sound of chainsaws. That's why all the guitar sounds in the music for Doom sounds so violent, because it's a chainsaw guitar essentially. The instrument doesn't exist. It's just a mixture between a chainsaw and a guitar, and that was a genius move, because if you know it and you listen to it, sometimes you can even pick it out. It's like, oh, there's this kind of in this kind of riff, there's a chainsaw riffing sound. If you know it, you can hear it, and it's like, oh, it's so genius. But if you don't know it, it's just something that feels like a chainsaw feels. It's dangerous, it's violent, and it fits the music perfectly. So these kinds of mixing together sounds, mashing them up, is something you will probably always do. There are cases where you don't.
That are hyper realistic. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead.
I was about to say, for things that are hyper realistic, like if you have a monster that doesn't exist in reality and you want to make it even scarier than reality, then it makes sense. But some people would think that if you have a sound of a gunshot, what is the problem to just record that gunshot and put it in a video game? Like, why doesn't it have the same effect?
For a gunshot, for example, like trying to record a gunshot is very hard, because a gunshot essentially is a very loud sound for a very short time, and then all the rest. So, I mean, of course, you nowadays have 32-bit sounds, but most gunshots, like even the libraries, are comprised of many different sounds. Like a microphone that, for example, is set to a very, very low gain to just capture the first crack. And then something that is way more sensitive, that goes into the red, like all the way for the first gunshot, but it captures the rest of it, for example. And then, of course, you have for a gunshot, if you have a gunshot in like an empty, not an empty room, in an anechoic chamber where you have no reverb at all, it sounds so boring. Like the same thing with like popping a balloon. If you ever have the chance to stand in an anechoic chamber, I can really recommend it. Like if you pop a balloon, it just sounds like a small bubble popping. There's nothing there. Without the reverb, there's nothing. It's just a simple pop that's gone in an instant. So all these kinds of layers, like layers of reverberation that you want. Maybe the gun sound is from farther away and you need to hear all the reverberation through the city. So these kinds of sounds are layers that you need to use. You need to hear the sound maybe clearly because it's a shooter and you want to hear if someone shoots. So it doesn't have necessarily to sound realistic. It has to be, I know, utilitarian to the player. It's a sound that needs to communicate something very specific. And you can only achieve that with layering, because I don't know if people have heard guns in real life, but most of the time you will probably have like some kind of hearing protection, and it's not an interesting sound per se. But the kind of things we hear in movies and the kinds of things we are used to, those are interesting, and those are probably the things you're going to strive for. But for other sounds, for example, for nature sounds, they could be very, very easy, just the raw recording. Like a really great recording of a forest ambience could be just that without any layers. But most of the time you will want to have something extra in there, because we are making magic stuff happen, right?
So your approach is, well, not just your approach, the approach in general is to go to the more hyper-realistic place where you add more sounds than exist in reality.
Yes. I used to be like against that. Yeah. I used to be like very, I used to be, I try to be very, very puristic and try to record everything just like it happens. And the first thing that really bumped me on the nose there was when I was buying like a sword to record realistic sword sounds, because I wanted a sword. And the first time like I picked it up and it didn't make any noise at all. I was like, okay, I can't record this. It's like there's nothing happening. And then I was like, okay, I'm gonna bang it really hard with a fork to hear what it sounds like. And it's also not that interesting. Like that's why I then got Foley swords, and I can get them later. But like the kind of
Foley swords? You got Foley swords?
yes, let
They're
me show you
specifically
both of those
for
normal
Foley?
sounds.
Yes, please.
They're specifically for
Yes.
Foley because I'm just that crazy. Okay, give me 1 minute. I'm sorry about this.
No, we need to see that. So this is something that I talked about in, I want to say, Becoming Better Designer, episode 3. The idea of air pockets and creating like a resonance box around things to let the sound basically travel better, so you can hear it more. And now
Okay,
we're going to see
so-
Foley swords.
So this is a normal sword that you can buy. It's like a
Yes,
medieval thing. People make
we've
it,
seen
and
those.
like if you bang it, it's just a tiny bit of metal. It's fine. But this is a Foley sword. It has these bends in there, and it has very, very thin metal.
Oh, look at that.
And what that makes is this. It makes this wonderful long ringing sound.
Okay,
And
now
yeah,
my
you
mind
can-
is blown.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that's the kind of sounds you hear, especially like in the old like samurai movies when someone like picks a sword up, it's like this kind of sound. And it's absolutely unrealistic. No sword will ever do that. And yeah, that was something
Can I
that I learned
ask
the
you
hard
to
way.
just do that? Can I ask you to do the same thing, but then put each sword so we can hear the resonance from each one of them?
Oh yeah,
So,
you
like,
won't hear
the
anything from
regular
that, but
versus-
I will try. There's nothing happening. You can do whatever you want. Like
Okay. Yeah.
there's
yeah.
absolutely nothing happening. Ah. Yeah, I hope it comes through okay, but it's amazing. Like even picking this up, it's gonna ring a bit because it's very, very thin and it has these bends, so that's why it wiggles. And yeah, that's
Oh,
how you do it.
see.
Like you don't need to have like this hilt. You can just have a piece of metal with some bends in it. Some people even like last time I talked to a sound designer, he was showing me his Foley sword, which essentially was a big ladle, just a big spoon with holes in it, metal spoon, and it almost makes the same sound. A bit different resonance, of course, because depending on the length and the metal, but it's also the same. It's shing. It does this iconic sound, you know. And yeah, when I found that out.
Incredible.
One after the other, I found out the important part is not making it sound realistic if you want something realistic, but making it feel realistic. And you have some kind of expectations. And if you don't meet them, then the audience is that's gonna be boring. Like even in documentaries nowadays, you have sound designers for documentaries because I don't know, movement of ants, for example. If you film a nature documentary about ants, what kind of sounds do they make? I mean, you can have ultra sensitive microphones there, but that's also not realistic, right? Because it's not your ear, it's like this super microphone that picks it up. So yeah, you will have to always choose how something is supposed to feel, how something is supposed to make the player feel over realism. And that's where we come in.
I wonder, I don't know if you have thought about this, but like, where did those expectations come from? Because if we don't hear those sounds in nature, but we expect to hear them in movies,
Yeah.
why do we expect that?
I think, I personally think it's the kind of bias we just grew up with because when I've talked to people in my friends and family group that were like around weapons a lot because they were like in a special forces kind of deal, just let me put it like that. And they were all so shocked when they found out how guns would sound because in their mind it was always something different. And then if you go, he would tell me like if I go to the movies and a gun sounds realistic, maybe I would feel like, oh, this is really like a horrible situation. But everyone else that isn't around these situations at all in their life will just be bored. And I guess, yeah, that's the one thing. The bias is the one thing, and the other thing is that it always connects to something. Because in Star Wars, for example, that's the example everyone probably knows. Like you have the bad guys in their ships have these I don't know, snake sounds and sounds of animals that are threatening to you. And on a subconscious level, that makes you feel that kind of threat. And a realistic spaceship doesn't exist, so you have to make something up. And you always have to connect it with something, even if you don't know it, on a subconscious level that does something to you. I mean, everyone knows, for example, how it feels to be underwater. So having that kind of in the movies, that kind of feeling of underwater, um, for example, if you had the experience of almost drowning or some bad experience where you thought you might drown, then you can really relate to some scenes if they are done well, because the sound is going to be different. The sound is going to be very enhanced. It's going to be very ultra realistic, because for yourself, if you're in a threatening situation, your ears go into overdrive and you hear every little single sound. One of the examples that is amazing, in my opinion, is Alan Wake 2. They do this thing where they put all the Foley sounds on a very, very loud level. Like, it's absolutely not realistic, but it sounds like it would sound if you would be in the woods alone and something is chasing you and you are afraid for your life, because then your ears will go up and it will realize every single detail. And by doing this from the sound thing, they make you feel this kind of anxiousness. And even I know that it's happening on an emotional level. I know about the soundcraft, but even I myself, like, the hairs on the back of my neck stand up when I play it, because it's just, you can't do anything about it. It's just nature. And yeah, that's just the way it is. And I think over time there's this thing that this kind of sound language has evolved for things like breaking bones is this kind of snap you always hear, and every doctor will probably tell you, or every sports athlete that has broken a lot will probably tell you, not that realistic, but everyone kind of is attuned to that, so it's what people expect.
That is very true. My memory is like taking me to when I was seeing Wonder Woman, and there is a moment of a big explosion, and suddenly she just hears this ringing in her ear and just goes, and the guy's trying to talk to her, and all she can hear is this. I'm like, wow,
Yes.
that is, yes, it puts me in the position of someone who just heard the loudest boom in their life, and everything is muted after this.
Yeah, exactly.
He recreated it in a very realistic way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was about to ask, besides all of the sound design and Foley that you're doing, you also host a podcast. Can you tell us a bit about your podcast? How did it start? How is it going?
Yeah. So my podcast is called Field and Foley, and you were a wonderful guest on it. And yeah, it's like, it started out because on New Year's, 1.5 years ago now, I told myself, okay, next year I'm going to try to talk to as many sound professionals as I can, especially for people that made something that really connected with me, that I really admired. For example, the Dune movie or Alan Wake, whatever else I can find, like God of War, everything that like really connected with me, and I want to like pick their brains. And while I was thinking about that, like, okay, if I'm gonna ask them for a call, and I'm gonna probably want to talk to them for an hour or so because I want to hear so much stuff, why not just record it and make a podcast out of it? So it was a very selfish thing to start with, and I found out it's going pretty well actually. It's like people really like it, and also non-audio people like it, which made me go into the habit of trying to, whenever I have someone new and with a new job description, because we don't just have sound designers, we have field recorders, we have acoustical heritage people, which is something I've never heard of before. I'm always going to ask them, like, oh, what is that? Can you explain it in very simple terms? And that means that also people that are not into sound are very interested in that, because they get a little intro. And I mean, sometimes there's some things in there that I don't understand, but overall they feel like they hear from people talking very passionate about their craft. And then also they hear about these amazing projects. Like, for example, like the Alan Wake guys I just had on, was amazing to hear how they approached it, why they did it, and how it worked so well. And the amount of work and passion that goes into these projects sound-wise is something that I really am always love to show to people. So this kind of like, hey, listen to this. That's amazing. You need to know this because you love all those movies. You maybe know the actors, maybe you even know the director, but you won't never hear about the sound designer because, I don't know, it's just the unsung heroes, I guess. Nowadays, it has gotten a bit better with the recognition, but still, it's like this whole world of people, and it's not just the craft itself for video games or for films. I have so many people that are just like field recorders for the sake of it, or field recorders to show how nature is changing and how we have to preserve certain aspects of nature. And yeah, so many different kind of areas of audio that I've never heard before. And yeah, so it has become something that is also motivating myself to do it, because I want to learn about all these things. So whenever I see something, it's like, oh, I've never heard of that before. I want to talk to that person. And yeah, the good thing is now that the podcast is over a year old and people are getting to know it, and people are taking me seriously as a real podcaster, so they will come on my show. And overall, in the sound space, you might notice like everyone is so nice. Like everyone is just, yeah. The name of the podcast is Field and Foley, like field recording and Foley recording.
When can we hear that
and it's,
podcast?
yeah, hopefully everywhere. Like it should be on Spotify, Apple, some other streaming services I have no idea about, like all around the world. But like wherever you get podcasts, you can also, if you search for Field and Foley podcast, you will find it. You will find us on Twitter, on Instagram. No, not on Instagram, on
We will
LinkedIn.
post links for it. Yeah.
Yeah, great. So you can listen to it on the site, or you can listen to it on your favorite podcast, yeah, service, wherever you want to hear it. And yeah, it's been going really good. And yeah, I started from selfish reasons, and now it's just for me, it's just such a joy to always learn about new stuff or to talk to people that are amazing. And I'm gonna give you all here a little inside information that nobody knows yet. I just recently talked to 3 of the people that made the new Jim Henson documentary about the Sesame Street and all that stuff, and they got to record in the actual Muppet workshop. Like they had all the material, they had Elmo servos to record and everything, and it was, oh, it blew my mind. It was amazing. And hearing them,
Oh my God.
hearing them how they approached all that, how they just made all these sounds fit into the documentary, and every sound is from puppets and from puppet materials. And if you haven't seen it, Jim Henson Idea Man, like watch that documentary. It's amazing. I cried so much. It was heartwarming and sound-wise one of the best documentaries I've ever heard. Yeah, just amazing work. And getting to talk to people like that is just so rewarding.
Wow, that's incredible. I'm already writing it down here. So I'll watch it at the end of the day because I always look for fun documentaries to watch. This is
Wonderful.
incredible. Ben, we're getting closer to the end. I want to ask if you have some tips or tricks that you got along the way that you want to share with us. Could be anything.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the most important tips, I would say, like I've heard a lot of tips and there are great tips out there, but one of the most important tips is to learn to really embrace failure. And I say that because just a week ago, I went out to record. I forgot my bug spray, so I was like very tense because everyone kept stinging me. And I set up my equipment and I listened to it on headphones, sound good, levels sound good. I recorded for 15 minutes, then I was like, I gotta get out of here. And it turns out that I set my headphone mix to something completely different than my recording mix, and I recorded 1.5 gigabytes of total silence in ambisonics. So it was a total bust. I recorded nothing. The whole trip was for naught. But it was so funny because I came home and I thought like, oh, that is a real nice, quiet nature recording. So so many things will go wrong during recording. So don't go in expecting, I don't know, everything to work or most of it to work. Just expect everything to go wrong and go with it. And sometimes something happens that you might think like, oh, I did something shitty. I recorded something shitty. And half a year from now, you're going to need a shitty recording. And then, try to recreate a shitty recording. It's not that easy. Like, there's so many examples. Like I had one guest that recorded their like school band as one of their first or second projects, and she said like, oh, and they were really, really terrible. And I was like, amazing, keep that recording. Like imagine if like 2, 3, 4 years from now you're doing a music project or like a film project and you need a recording of a shitty band. Try to find a band that is shitty and try to tell them like, hey, I need to record you because you play so badly. That's impossible to get. So whatever happens where you think like, oh, this didn't work out, this sounds like shit or something, you can always either layer it up with something else, or you can learn from it. You can listen, why did I record this way and why did it doesn't it work? So everything that goes wrong is just, it is a blessing. And if you can embrace that, you're going to have a lot of fun, and it's going to make everything so much easier.
That is an amazing advice, and thank you so much for it. Sometimes, as musicians or as artists, we forget that we don't make mistakes. We find other ways of approaching the world, and that's okay. Like, there is
Yes.
no one path to do things, because if there was exactly one song or one sound, and that would have been the perfect one, but there isn't. It's like it's
Yeah.
all over the place. And it's super important for me. I had to like remind myself constantly that even though I have this like big tech job, it's also okay to fail. It's also okay to bring a sound that is not your best sound and try again tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes even like what always blew my mind in at the first like couple of interviews I had, that even recordings from an iPhone can end up in a big Hollywood movie, because sometimes it's just the right sound and you were there with your iPhone and you recorded it and it was fine enough. You
Yeah.
could clean it up a bit and it's in one scene and it's the perfect thing. And trying to find that then like specifically is going to be impossible. So that's also going back to the gear. It doesn't matter what kind of gear you have your recorder on hand and record. If you have something to record right now, you're gonna have that sound. That's fine. If it's the quality is shit, it doesn't matter. You're gonna have it at least. And even if it's, I would say like almost unusable, you can listen to it. You can learn like, oh, what kind of components go into that sound. If you try to recreate that kind of sound, also like that's also a great thing to have. So everything you have is worthwhile.
The TikTok watermark, I'm pretty sure, like they added some layer that they didn't want to add, and like they just left it there by accident,
Yeah.
and it became this like sound that we all remember from like the end of every TikTok video, that boom drum.
Yeah.
Um, there is a layer there that's just forgotten. I think it's like a dog bark or something that shouldn't be there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's how it
So,
goes.
yes, yes, I think that through those mistakes, you can learn more about yourself than through like the excellent work that you trust everything that you did.
Yeah.
You're right. Embracing mistakes is a great advice. You also mentioned that you sometimes use stock audio. Can we ask what you're using or what do you recommend using?
Yes. One of my most favorite like producers of sample libraries is Tonsturm, because they make like these very specific libraries. One of the first thing I got were, for example, was Raging Fire, because like they burned whole cars and they had like an explosion specialist and stuff like that, had a flamethrower and stuff. Like everything I can't record myself, I try to find high quality sounds for. And of course, I'm gonna like not just use this fire sound, I'm gonna mix in my own sounds to make it unique. But that's something like if I need something like an exploding canister, I'm not going to record that. It's like some things I don't want to record. And there are many different field recorders I can really recommend. For example, Chris Bald, who's here right now, has done some amazing recordings that I can recommend. Thomas Rex Beverly is another one that makes
Yeah.
just the craziest recordings. He goes out into glaciers and like he has even left one of his microphones there because it got frozen in a glacier and he had to like cut the cord because he couldn't get it out. After an hour he was just like, okay, I'm gonna just leave it there.
Wow.
But he had this recording of it. So the lengths he goes through and the places he visits, like the Antarctica and Patagonia and stuff like that, it's so far out there. So if you need something very specific, I can recommend looking up those people or other as well. Like if you look for field recorders, you're gonna find some amazing people. And yeah, otherwise, what I also can recommend is reaching out to people, because I also had like this kind of trades. It's like, oh, I need this helicopter sound, and a friend is like, oh, I recorded this helicopter at this military show in the US. It's like, oh, amazing, can I have it? It's like, yeah, of course. So like trade with your fellow people, because I have something from Bavaria if someone needs something from Bavaria, very German. Some other people have something from the jungle because it's right around their corner. So connect with people and find that kind of source material is always fun. Yeah.
This is also an advice that I give to people that don't live in like the major cities where things are happening. Like usually in those environments, you will find something special that those people would buy from you.
Yes.
I had someone on the chat from Africa that told me like, we don't have the fancy studios that you have in America. And I said, that does not matter. You have
Amazing.
birds that we've never even heard before. We want those
Yes.
sounds. Go and record them. Um, And even here in Boston, people are telling me, like, please record the local birds, please record the local water, because we want to hear
Yes.
how that soundscape sounds like. So in
Yeah.
every place, there is something to gain from it. As you said, like in Bavaria, like you can record sounds that don't appear anywhere else in the world. So that's very, very
Exactly.
true. And
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
connecting and trading. And even with synthesizers, I think that, Ben, there was even time that I sent you like a recording from a Moog 1 synthesizer just because I had it.
Yes.
And like, why not? Why not use this as one of your source materials? So
Absolutely.
yes,
Yeah.
if you see people with cool gear, just ask them to record some samples for you. And usually people would say yes. That's what I found.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We're getting towards the end. Ben, is there anything else you would like to add or discuss or share with us?
I don't think so. I mean, I have a lot of other microphones as well, but I try to limit myself to 3 very special ones right now. Yeah, just like the things I already said, embrace failure. The gear is not important. It really isn't. Like, as I said, I'm now getting a very cheap portable recorder because it's the best thing to have on hand always. And the listening, like learning to listen. In the beginning, I didn't do that. I just go out with my recorder and record everything. And then after a while, I realized I don't understand the places. I don't understand the things I'm trying to create. And just having a simple recording is like a flat thing. But that's not what you want to do. You want to recreate worlds, or you want to create new worlds. So you need to understand this world first. And like just
That
go
is
out
so true.
hiking, go out in nature, stay there. Maybe even if you can alone, and just stay there for half an hour, not talking, listening to stuff, find interesting places, and it's going to be rewarding. You're going to be out in nature. That's the best part of our job, really, being out in nature. Even if you not record, it's still work.
That is very true. Oh, then we can finish the call here. Ben, thank you so, so much. If you can post all of the links that you mentioned or any resources that you have, that will be great. And thank you for being with us.
Thank you as well. I see like someone has, oh, Melissa has already posted a lot of things, and Chris, that's amazing. Thank you
Yes,
all. I'm
yes.
going to see if I can find anything. Or if you have anything you want to know, feel free to hit me up. I'm always up for talking. If you have any questions, if you forgot what I said, just ask me again. I'm going to
Ben is a
talk
part of
about
the
everything.
Sound Experience. So you can always ask any question that you want on the Discord server.
Exactly.
All right.
Just
Thank you
make
so
sure to
much.
ping me with it so I can actually see it.
Great. Thank you. And have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much for listening in on this week's Industry Talk with Ben Reichtein. This was such an interesting conversation. I feel like I just want to go out and record some water sounds now. If you want more resources about the topics that we discussed here today, plus more inspiring events and like minded people, join us on Discord. The link should be in the description below.